So I'm just gonna share my screen 1 second. There, and I'm just gonna move Zoom over here. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep, we can see it.
Great, lovely. So hello everyone, I am Alicia McCarthy. I am the laboratory manager here at the Toxicity Reduction Institute. I specialize in helping identify safer chemistries for industries, communities, municipalities, and our main area of focus is for cleaning applications specifically. We do here at TURI do some work related to research where it may be replacing certain solvents within a formulation. That is Dr. Greg Morose, who is my colleague who would focus in that area. So today our discussion will be focusing specifically on tools that you can even utilize or share as methods as a good starting point to be able to find safer options that are out there. And the two tools that I'm going to be discussing today is this one that you see in front of you called CleanerSolutions Database, which is a database filled with information from vendors of different cleaning chemicals, as well as the test data that the laboratory generates. It could be client specific, or it can also be non-client as well. The second tool that I'm going to discuss today is our pollution prevention options analysis system, P2OASys. And this is a hazard assessment tool, but it is also, if any of you are familiar with it, a discussion tool, which is what I appreciate about it compared to some of those plug and chug sort of modeling systems for hazard analysis, because it allows you to really assess the chemistry, how it's being utilized, and work with other people to have those deeper discussions on whether whatever alternative you're comparing to what you are currently using is the most appropriate for your application. So I'm first going to go over CleanerSolutions Database to give you some context of when I would utilize these types of tools. Normally when I'm working with a company to find a safer alternative, I may be contacted via email, and we may do it remotely, which has been a learning experience over the pandemic. As well as going in person to see site visits and how certain types of chemistries are being utilized in cleaning applications. I would learn about the cleaning process itself, and then I would go and actually turn to CleanerSolutions Database for us to see what has been done before, because we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel if possible. It saves time, and it allows people a really good starting point in knowing what things work well on certain types of substrates of what you're trying to clean. And there's always room for adding new information here. And you're going to probably find that some of the alternatives that are listed in here may not be recommendations that we ourselves would actually recommend. However, we want those people to know about their existence of them and the hazards that they may impose at that time, because at one time we may have found them safer. So when you're utilizing this database, there are a couple different options of where you can start off with. You can find a product. You can start with replace a solvent if you know what you're trying to replace. If you're interested in safety evaluation, which is one of our newer features, and it ties into P2OASys. And then there's also browse client types, so you could look at some of our case studies that we have in here to kind of get a generalized idea for different sectors. Or you could look by part search. Normally when I'm utilizing this type of database tool, I tend to utilize mostly find a product or replace the solvent. It depends on your choice for the most part, but those are really good starting points. Down here on the website itself, we have a client request form. Even if you do not want to have us do specific testing for you, feel free to, recommend a client for submitting this form. We do have contracts that we can do with out of state for very low cost. We hire on students here from UMass Lowell that do a majority of the work, and a lot of the funding that we take in from this type of testing just goes towards hiring that student and any of the wear and tear on the equipment that we may utilize. But we're not in it for the money. It's just to keep up things. But if it's even just getting our feedback on certain types of applications, you can have them fill it out, and we'd be more than happy to give recommendations or at least starting points if you're still unsure where to go or what type of cleaners you may want to sort of test out or look at. Vendor forms, if those are really good, we try and send those out to different vendors and figure out different types of equipment that's out there, different cleaners, and we're always trying to keep adding to this database. You can search by vendor supplied information as well. And also you can browse certain vendors and products. So that can be very helpful if you know a specific vendor, or if your company is already working with a vendor, you could see what other alternatives they already have on their list that maybe you can start from there. So that way they're not having to recreate new relationships with different vendors if they're not comfortable. And this is a video that if you would like to watch it, you are more than welcome to watch it. It kind of goes into our process of how we actually go about testing. You can see some of the students and actually see some of our workspace. And it just kind of gives the overview of the TURI cleaning lab, about it, and the database demos. So if you have any questions that I may not be able to answer today, or like you think about them later on and you kind of want to know, how do I utilize this again? You can either refer to this recording and feel free to reach out to me, or we also have demos on here too that can teach you how to utilize this database. Both helpful. That's kind of the basic overview of this part of it. So if I went to find a product, we have a required field, because many people, when you're working with a company or client, they know what they're trying to remove. Whether or not they have a sample of what they're trying to remove may be a different story. We've worked with clients, for example, that got parts that were being manufactured in another state or country that they knew kind of what was on it, that it was an oil or a grease. However, they didn't have samples for us to test in-house. So we can do a more generalized search from there. But what I like about this is you can pick multiple ones, and you even see dog vomit on there. We do both janitorial and industrial, so you're going to see for both applications, and that's why it's kind of applicable too for even a community setting as well, or a public health department that you know of, that if they want to recommend safer cleaners or disinfectants, we do have some options in here, especially where our disinfection lab has been up and running since the pandemic. So if I were for example, working with a company and they said, Alicia, I'm trying to remove oil, and we'll do like cutting, tapping fluids, and we'll even say greases. So you can actually click which ones that you want. It used to be that we had to hold shift to click everything. So this is the new updated version where we try and make it as easy as possible for you, where you can actually just click on all the contaminants that you want to look at. So that's the required field. And then you have an optional field. So say this company was telling us, we really, we work with ceramics. Our carts are ceramic, aluminum, and we'll say copper. And I don't have to fill in equipment too. I could, if I know what they're utilizing, or if I want to see, say if I'm working with a company and they've been using vapor degreasing for a very long time and they're open to new cleaning processes, I can actually leave that blank to kind of see, well, what works in different applications on those substrates and contaminants. Same way on the opposite side of things, you could look at equipment applications and see what the lab has tested for different substrates. And just because it is in the database doesn't mean that it doesn't work on those different substrates or contaminants. It may just be that we haven't done it, but there will be vendor information on whether those types of cleaners are appropriate. So optional search filters, product cleaning type. So this is where, say if I wanted to only look at janitorial cleaners, I could, precision or parts cleaning, or you could just do any and just see what comes up. For this, I'll just say parts cleaning. And you could just click submit here and you'll get a full list, but I like to save some time. And I'll do, you know what, I want to see only the ones that were effective when they were tested. And also I only want ones that are currently available on the market when we checked it. And we try and check it every couple of years to do updates to ensure that what is being manufactured is still processed. And we're always updating that as well. But that would be helpful too. But the reason why we don't just remove them from the database is because we want to make sure that we can see what are these legacy chemicals, because it may have worked, but they may have stopped manufacturing it, but doesn't mean that what's in that cleaner should be forgotten. And we can look at those different types of the type of cleaner, whether say alkaline, aqueous, or acidic aqueous, what works better on it, or even seeing what are the main components in those types of cleaners. So if I hit submit, it will give you a search information results with everything, the search criteria that we looked at will be listed here. We have 475 records. So you have a lot of results. We condensed it down. It used to be that every single individual effective one was placed in its own line, as you kind of see here, but instead we've actually now with our updates have grouped them. So for example, Buckeye International Shopmaster was tested on aluminum, painted steel, and stainless steel, those 3 different substrates, and it didn't have specified equipment for it at that time. So if now we have our search result, what do you do from here? Well, you can kind of look at different ones. Safety evaluation, which as you can see here, you can refine your safety search evaluation, which is aligned with our P2OASys system that I'll get into, where 2 is the lowest, lower concern. It means that there's less of an environmental and human health impact, all the way to 8 to 10, which is a very high concern. And these are the overview of the total score of those products when we're assessing a different chemistry for different endpoints. So Buckeye's pretty high, 6.8. It's high concern. I may not want to do it, but that's at concentrate, however, for an alkaline aqueous. So depending what the hazards are, if they're manageable and they're not, if it's just more like eye and skin protection that I need to look at for corrosivity, maybe I want to explore that one. But if it's dealing with inhalation hazards and I know that that company doesn't have the appropriate engineering controls or PPE for whatever the endpoints are, I may not want to choose that. But for now, let's compare it. So we click on that one. I'm interested. I've heard about these alcohol different classification of cleaners, so I'll click on that one. That's a 4.6. It seems like a medium concern. And we'll also do this other 4.6. So you can actually hit comparison to that. And then you can actually compare them together if you would like to. So I think it's on the bottom. So yeah, here we go. So it actually aligns it side by side for you. So you could actually see, oh, okay, well, Buckeye, let's see. Oh, it has all these different types of equipment that a vendor recommended that I could work for in different applications. These are the recommended substrates. It has other ones that I didn't think about. The different contaminants, does it expand beyond just the ones that I looked at? Maybe there's some ones that the company didn't talk to you about for different applications they can utilize to replace certain types of cleaners. And we try and update the SDS and the TDS on here as well. And TURI actually has its own TDS that we try and have vendors fill out that you can download as a PDF. And it will go into more information. We may be able to pull more information from them than what they're just giving out from their TDS. We may ask them more specific cleaning questions. So if you're ever curious about a specific type of cleaner and you want us to ask a vendor, we'd be more than happy to do that and get this type of information filled out for you. So this is a lot. I'd like to stop here and kind of answer any questions for anyone right now, just based off of just this overview of how to search different types of products based off of cleaning criteria.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Ms. McCarthy, but definitely some very detailed and a lot of interesting things that have been tested. So definitely a good resource to start looking through. So just wanted to give you those comments as we proceed forward.
Oh, good. I just wanted to check in. All right, so that's one way of going about it, and you can actually remove items and select another product if you'd like to. So that's how you do find a product. Now, if I wanted to replace a solvent, you can either do the drop down here, or you could go back to the main page. The required field, instead of it now being a contaminant, it's now showing you the solvent. And these could be based off of, again, a case study, and that's why you see more specified types of solvents in there, or it could be more general, like talking about trichloroethylene or perchloroethylene or any of those different ones. And I know those are huge topics right now, especially with vapor degreasing, of what alternatives are out there right now for, M-propyl bromide. We'll actually go down, I think some of the hot topic ones.
Alicia, this is Mark.
Mark.
I know one company in Indiana that attempted to replace their vapor degreasing solvent, TCE, with a blend of solvents. One was 1,2-trans-dichloroethylene, and then there was 2 other VOC exempt solvents. They might have been HFCs.
Okay.
And so, but what they found out was that they were not able to replace that. So they ended up going back to TCE. And their biggest concern, they do parts for medical implants. And so it's the residue. Once you've cleaned the part, they can't have any residue on that part.
So definitely in those types of cases, because we've also been working with companies that finding an alternative, especially for vapor degreasing applications and the residue, it really is a case by case. I would have to know specifically what their contaminants are, what is their range of flexibility for cleaning time, what is their bandwidth for being able to, can they get an automated system versus is it manual that the workers is going to be doing it, if it's more of an immersion or an ultrasonics step of putting those baskets in. Also, how much are they actually cleaning on a daily basis as well? And that's why we kind of talk about, when it comes to replacing these types of chemistries, it's not easy. It's a very unique, dependent on the client and what their needs are for their cleaning processes. But however, we were just working with a metal finisher that went to, it wasn't the safest option that TURI would have suggested from an aqueous standpoint, but they went to a safer solvent option called Degrease 500 Low, where now they're removing trichloroethylene. They're not using these halogenated solvents in their systems. And now we're just kind of refining. They're actually, I went to go see them recently because they were getting this white residue left behind on their parts. So, but what they were finding was heat removed it, or even a rinse step. So it's really important to talk to whoever you're trying to assist. I feel like of what is their flexibility and what is their funding situation at that time. Right now, all the alternatives that are for vapor degreasing applications are not safer alternatives. They're going to be regrettable substitutions, especially if they're halogenated. But I'd be more than happy to help you kind of pick out some options too, if you'd like to email me further about that.
Sure. Yes, that would be great. I think it would help maybe if you were to let me know what specific details you might need,
Sure.
in terms of whether, batch or continuous. It is an electroplater, and I think they do a lot of batch, but there may be questions I need to ask them. I tell a lot of people, and this may be true with other SBEAP people, jack of all trades, master of none. And I emphasize master of none. So I rely on people like yourself, who are the experts, to kind of help me perhaps not look so, maybe even kind of look a little intelligent by passing on your information to them.
But you always forget the ending of that. Knowing so many fields is better than one. But sorry, that was kind of cheesy. But definitely I can help you out. See up here where it says forms, and it has client test request form. You can actually click on that, And we have a digital version of everything I would need to know to be able to help you out with that. And we can kind of go from there. Maybe we can do a Zoom call to discuss it further.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, that would be great.
Great. So yeah, for replace a solvent though, it's basically the same idea. We could hit acetone. You have optional fields, and it will show you case studies of where the original solvent that they were trying to replace was acetone. And it's always important to remember too that just because it worked in lab situations does not mean it will always work in real world application in larger scale. And that's kind of where that company example that I gave you for the metal finisher was on small scale using degrease 500 low. They were not getting the white powder of their buffing compound on there. But when they started doing larger scale, they started seeing that. So that's kind of what we're working with right now, is we're finding either the rinse step or a heated dry step to kind of remove it, because both of those options work. It's just what is more economically feasible for them. So I hope that helps. And then let's see, safety evaluation goes into, again, when I go over P2OASys, this will make more sense to you, and maybe I'll hold it off on this until we actually go over that section. But for browse client types, we've started organizing a lot of these by, additive manufacturing, adhesive manufacturers. You can actually go in and actually say, okay, well, for this, it was jewelry. They wanted to find a safer drying method, want to replace isopropyl alcohol for drying copper tubes. So you can actually see what they were trying to do, where we were at, if we did a tech transfer, if there was implementation involved, and you can see there's multiple different clients. So like 276, for example, will actually show you pictures of what they were trying to clean, which can also be helpful. I'm a visual learner as well as a hands-on learner. So seeing visuals of the actual parts themselves can be extremely helpful. And we try and share what we can. We always ask permission from the company first, because you never know if it's proprietary. But if we can kind of give you an example of something that you can refer to, we try and do that as well. So I highly suggest taking some time, if you'd like, and just seeing, what are examples of things that we've done or different sectors that we've worked with. This is specifically lab-based case studies. We're always adding to this, and we're working with multiple different types of industries. So just because it may not be specifically in here doesn't mean that research department here at TURI hasn't worked with that. And we're trying to capture those case studies and place them on here. So that's still an in process that we're working on. Parts descriptions. So it's really hard to be specific for every different type of application. So it may look like these are kind of generalized, like, is it rough or smooth? Is it simple or complex? Does it have blind holes? These are just small ways, but it's really important to kind of think about these types of things, because depending on the type of equipment that you're utilizing to clean, for example, like an aqueous cleaner, if you have blind holes on a part, immersion aqueous or even ultrasonic may not be enough. It could create air pockets for you, where solvent, you wouldn't have that same issue. So maybe you need to use an airless cleaning system, or vacuum cycling nucleation system to really allow for it to get into those nitty-gritty areas. But this can also be another way for you to utilize and find different types of cleaners for these different types of applications, especially as you get into the bigger parts. So for vendor and product search, I use this as well too, especially if I'm like thinking of a company. I'm like, oh, hey, I don't know, let's do Kaizen or something like that. Oh, no, it's a product name. Kaizen. Oh, look, Kaizen Corporation. So you can see all these different options for you. And what's nice too is you can actually organize these by safety score or by classification. So say if I want to only look at aqueous options, I can actually click the top of that and go, go alphabetical. So I can get to those alkaline aqueous and actually look at the hazards of those ones, or whatever type of classification for a cleaner that you want to look at too. I find that helps organize and cut down my time as well when looking for different options. Also to go into it as well. So say if I go into the product name any of the products that are listed in here, it will tell you the vendor name, so you can always go back to the major vendor. You can see sort of the information, and this is also where we house the TDS and the SDS as well. It will also give you, it actually pulls information from P2OASys, from our internalized scoring that Jason, myself, and even the students here have done and discussed and verified that we found that this was a good safety evaluation overview of that product. Again, it always changes depending on how it's being used. You can see that with process factors. However, a majority of the other classifications endpoints for acute human effects, chronic human effects, they stay about the same. It's just how it's being utilized will change, the same with the life cycle factors. But this will give you a general idea. So for example, this would highlight it, be like acute human effect, what is causing that 8, that really high score? Like I said, 2 being a low and 10 being a high. So I probably would want to go into, and this actually tells you more about the tool, I probably would want to go into P2OASys and find out what was driving that 8. Is it an eye irritation? Or is it, you know, an inhalation hazard that I need to think about? And then you can also see different types of clients that we worked with. You can click on those. You can see projects. You can also look at trial numbers too. So trial numbers are just the individual reports that we had done for that specific project. So if I went into project number 3, for example, I can say, oh, project number 3 was looking at, you know, successfully evaluate the use of Kaizen Ionox HC2 for the removal of surface flux from circuit boards, the test objective, what was the whole point of this testing. And you can actually read the reports in here too, to see how they worked, and you can save and download them as well. So there's a lot of information on here. I know it may be overwhelming. It's one of those things where you just kind of have to explore and play around with and look in here to see what is the information that's most important to you. And we're always open to new feedback on how we can make this more user-friendly. But we also try and highlight too, if you go underneath, again, the vendor, browse vendors, we try and update, you know, contact phone information, websites. If it's more generalized or they're out, we've been highlighting if the company is no longer around anymore, or if it's just more for referral to understand what types of companies were out there. This is a really good place too if you want to know what types of cleaning vendors are out there.
Oh, excellent. Belinda, you had a question?
I did. I found this really great. I realized, oh my, I wish I knew about this resource before. But what I started looking for is, right now I have a client who wants to start up abrasive blasting to remove paints from metal.
Okay.
And they are looking at a product that I don't think is a good option because it has both chromium and nickel in it, and I'm sure we can find them something that doesn't have chromium and nickel in it. So I ran through and came up here with some of the tests on the media blasting, and this is where I came into as Mark says, you know, not being an expert in abrasive blasting. It's rather interesting because I've got 5 results and it's all the exact same company and product.
Really?
And it says that, like, for one of them, it gives the green check for blasting to remove paints from stainless steel.
Yep.
But then has an X for just steel, and then right above it, it has an X for stainless steel, so it's got mixed results for stainless steel.
Yes.
And so I'm like, how do I go in and figure out what I can really recommend to them?
Yeah. So if that were the case, like say if someone was reaching out to me, some kind of similar situation, and I'm not actually doing the lab testing, what I would do is I would probably go into first the client. So like the one that didn't work for steel, client number 90. I would probably see, you know, like actually like what were they looking to do? Is it as close to what they wanted to do? What were their goals? And I would also kind of read into the actual testing. Like for example, let's see, Surface Cleaning Library staff has recently written a paper to use. So this was just a technology transfer. And that's why it isn't technically effective. It's just, we didn't test anything. So it's a article that was in there that kind of went over an option for them. That's what it looks like. And that's why success rating was a technology transfer. I would also instead look at something like, for this one, I'd be curious. All right, well, 153, what were you? So this is a different company. Hard surface disinfection testing, cleaner disinfectants. Okay, so these are later projects. So which project was it for? So with project number 1, I would go into 153. We're only going to look at project number 1 and see chemicals. So these were preliminary tests that were done. They did a lot in 1999. Oh my. So let's go and we can actually see. So it's see how it had so many for that one. It's actually test number 4. Oh wait, did I hit the wrong one? Sorry. This one, 163. So then you can actually see the report specifically for that for 163. So for cleaning, they used a soda blasting unit with some baking soda as the medium, using a snow gun with carbon dioxide as the medium, rinsing, tap water, air drying, paint. And remember though, just because it didn't work for them, so sandblasting worked very well, but snow gun did not work at all. So they're saying that the equipment didn't work well. They're not saying that the cleaner itself didn't work well.
Okay.
So that's kind of where you can kind of make the decision of like, what is the equipment that they're currently using? Is it what they listed on there, or are they actually identifying whether the chemistry itself actually worked in that application? Oh, that's not good. I'll talk to them about that one, but yeah, see how it is. There's no specific company for this. So this looks like it was more in-house, us testing the equipment itself. So you could probably go based after the Armex cleaning coating removal system to check that and go based off of these 3, because I'm assuming if I went into the trial, you're actually going to see, yeah, they were testing the actual cleaner and evaluating the cleaner itself. And that will give you information too on how long they did it for. So like this one was for, show me, part was visually inspected for 15 seconds, overall cleaning. So about 5 minutes. So if your company that you're working with does it within 5-10 minutes, maybe some of these would be appropriate. If you're more concerned about the hazard aspect of it though, which it sounds like you are in this case.
Yes, it's like they're just starting up this process, and I really don't want them to begin with a product that has hazardous components to it.
Yep. So in that case, I mean, you could always reach out to us and we could do a little bit of research ourselves of other options for blasting applications. I mean, if anything, it looks like we do need more information on this. We just haven't come up with a case study where we had to run into this sort of situation, but we'd be more than happy to do a little background information for other options that are out there to assess. The other thing too is sometimes if there's certain components, it's not always the case, but it can't hurt to ask. Sometimes you can talk to the company, and depending on what is the hazardous component that you're concerned about, sometimes they can switch it for a safer option. It's not always that easy, but it never hurts to ask, especially if a company is going to buy large amounts of it or be a potential client for them. But yeah, feel free if you would like. Same thing for requests as well, and I'd be happy to look into it for you to assist. You could just do client test request form and fill out what you're looking for, and I can have a student work on that to help with the research.
That's fabulous. Yeah, because I think someone's just trying to sell them the only product they make.
And I'm sure there are a ton out there. It may have just been at that time this was the one that was available to us, that maybe the client had come to us, because it looked like this was done again back in, what was it, this one? Yeah, 2002, which is quite a while ago, and I'm sure there are plenty of other options that are out there.
Thank you. This really is fabulous.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it. But yeah, if ever you guys have questions, if anything, it helps us as well to know if there's a certain area that's lacking alternatives that we can do deep dives in. It's projects that students can work on, and we can look it over for them and just give you more options to look at. We really want this to be something that people can utilize and assist in growing just based off of your knowledge, because I may know certain areas, sectors, but we all are working in different areas, and what's important here up in Massachusetts may not be the same sectors that we're seeing down in other states. So please feel free to reach out or ask questions. I'd be more than happy to help with that. So yeah, so I kind of went over the vendors, the forms, CleanerSolutions. So the about section, this kind of goes into, again, the help topics, TURI Lab Home. You could actually go to our website area. And then this gives you just a little bit more information of what CleanerSolution does and who you can reach out to, and same with contact information. My information's on there as well, and same with Jason. So feel free to email us. So I think that kind of is the overview of CleanerSolutions. So now I'm going to go into P2OASys. So P2OASys, say if I have my alternatives on there, I'm interested in looking at them, but I don't know what is safer than MPB or whatever I'm trying to replace. So you would get started on here, and this is just a sample chemical, but to go over what you're actually going to be assessing is, this is the P2OASys format. We look at these areas for collecting data. So I'll expand all of them. So you have acute human effects, and as you can see, there's areas that you would normally see on a safety data sheet, which is what we really wanted to kind of utilize as a first resource, considering most workers, that's their first line of defense when it comes to the knowledge aspect of certain like chemistries or whatever they're utilizing at that time. However, we understand that there are limitations with SDS sheets, or it may be lacking a ton of information. So that's why we align this with the global harmonized system as well. And we give a list of resources. You can kind of see some of these hyperlinked areas, so like PPM, where we have gathered external resources for being able to collect data on these certain areas. So say if it's missing specific information on an SDS sheet, and you have the components, or at least an understanding of what's in the product, you can start doing a little bit deeper dive into some of these databases to collect that information to plug and chug into P2OASys. It is overwhelming at first. A good example is when I first tried doing my first assessment of the chemistries themselves or products. I think it took me like 40 minutes to do it, whereas now I can do it within 15, 20 minutes, and just getting used to it, getting comfortable of knowing where to find this information to plug in that information. But we tried to make sure that everything could be easily available, and that's why we also post the SDS sheets where we can on CleanerSolutions. So if it's not in our current database that Jason and I have looked at, then you can grab it too and do an assessment. We look it over as well, and feel free to reach out to us saying, is this the right way of doing it? Or if you even want us to sit with you on a call while you're trying it out for the first time, I'd be more than happy to do that with you. The major areas that change all the time though, and compared to other hazard assessment tools, is that process factors, for example, those are very specific to a company. We're looking at the heat, the noise generation, vibration, ergonomic hazards, psychosocial hazards, exposure potential. And I kind of incorporate a lot of my site visits, conversations with different clients on how can you incorporate thinking about industrial hygiene aspects into your assessment of a chemical, because I may be utilizing a hazardous chemical that if it's in an enclosed system, my concerns maybe meet more on the front end of when they're actually pouring in the cleaner into that piece of equipment. Or, you know, is the maintenance, like, is the certain type of equipment that I recommend, is it very obscure? Is there one company in the entire United States that has, you know, the only patent on it? And if they go out of business, they can't get updates to their equipment. So it tries to get you thinking about those sort of social stresses that they may see in a workplace when they're adopting new types of cleaners. And also, it could be an opportunity for you to look at other methods of making a case for safer alternatives, such as utilizing or reducing your use of energy or water usage or heat or even noise generation that could cause long-term damage or even financial costs that they may not be thinking about as well, or even PPE that they have to utilize. Are they using Silver Shield, or can we find something that now uses nitrile gloves and they're more concerned about Slash? So when you're using this, this is a very judgment based, and you should be going into it with the idea that you are the expert, but you can then get feedback from the workers and the people who are in charge of making those decisions, and how, you know, how those changes could play and impact that company and those specific workers that are doing the cleaning themselves. Life cycle factors as well, looking at, you know, upstream effects. Are the people who are actually manufacturing this chemical, you know, required to use hazardous materials, excess energy, water, and other resources? The company that you may be assisting, it may not be on the front of their mind or see it as a impact, but by looking at and thinking about the life cycle of those specific chemistries that we recommend, we're not only helping a company that is directly using it, but we're also thinking about not just the end of life, but also the upstream, those who are manufacturing that may be getting the full brunt of the exposures, especially to those raw materials. It also can be a really good way for you to reflect on, is there a way for me to recycle any of this? We've had times where we've recommended a cleaner and it's an aqueous cleaner, and people are surprised that they can recycle like 85% or even 95% of their cleaner, depending on what it is or the equipment that they're utilizing. Whereas before they were using a solvent and maybe they were losing 60 gallons a week, depending on how old their equipment is. So I highly suggest when you're utilizing this tool, especially when it comes to those areas, think about how it's being used. Yes. I see a hand up, Donovan, I think. Any questions?
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. I saw a hand up, so I just want to pause. So yeah, so I can show you examples of this, and you can, I highly suggest it's sort of like any other program. Save as you go, hit the save changes, you will be sad otherwise. But what's nice is save, it takes you longer to make an assessment. You can actually export that data that you've created in here for like a new assessment, which I'll show you, as a CSV, and then when you're ready to go back to it, you can actually upload that file so you can start where you left off there. And then you can also upload it to our P2OASys database, which is right here. I'll show you the P2OASys database. So this is ones that people either submitted, the students had made, I had made, or Jason, that we kind of looked through. And as you can see where it says reviewed, it just means that Jason and I really looked at it and we compared what we saw, we did deep dives into it. And there's a lot, we have tried to make every single thing that is in P2OASys is now, sorry, in CleanerSolutions is now in P2OASys, at least at concentrate. So you have to consider that too. So like Micro 90, for example, is an aqueous cleaner where vendor recommendation is 2%, but it's showing a 6.5 because that's at concentrate. That's another thing to think about too, is those hazard endpoints. If you ever have any questions, feel free to poke me about it. But so say if I add that chemical dissection, I clicked on it, maybe I'm curious about that. And then say if I want to compare, another big one, I think that I've seen a lot lately is the metal. To create six. That's been a modified alcohol I've seen a lot more adoption of. And then You can also do by pass number 2, which can save you a lot of time as well. If it says CS in the front, it just means that it was used for a case study, so it is specific towards a use. But if I were to look at these, so for example, with micro 90, I can expand all in all these areas. Some of them are missing some endpoints, and it could be just we couldn't find the information on it. We try and aim for at least 60 different values that are plugged in, and it's helpful to see where we're missing information. That's kind of, that was a concern some people had was, what happens when you are missing information, because just because you don't have information doesn't mean it's safer, and that's true. I've actually found that this helps me realize, oh my gosh, this is missing information on respiratory irritation. Is this something I need to consider? And maybe I'll do more deeper dive on my own on those specific chemistries or talk to the vendor about that. But here we have inhalation toxicity. So you can it lets you see the areas of where you may need more information. And we've actually done, we just did a comparison of some of the alternatives for TCE to like the trans-dichloroethylene and the HFEs, and we did a green screen that we paid for versus this, and honestly, we didn't really miss much. I'm not saying it replaces green screen. I think it is great to invest in those, but this is a really good starting point for someone who may have no budget and just wants to do a general comparison and fill things out, or even get familiar with the different chemistries. I've gotten much more familiarized what common hazards are seen within certain aqueous cleaners versus certain solvent classifications. So say if I have those, I'm going to remove the sample chemical and I hit score summary. I want to compare them. So as I mentioned, the 2 to 4 is more preferred or safer, emphasis on the and 8 to 10 being the less preferred or more hazardous. Micro 90 is pretty high for acute human effects, but when I go in, it's eye irritation that's driving it, and maybe dermal irritation, and it's missing respiratory information. But you go into here and you look in other areas, and you can see where the other hazards lie that could be driving that. Like exposure limits are pretty high for trichloroethylene, so you can start really comparing them. Like, oh hey, carcinogen. I'm not going to even look at this one for my original chemical. There's not really a lot of information on metal NOx when it comes to the mutagen and reproductive toxicity, but micro 90 at concentrate may have some high concerns when it comes to neurotoxicity. So this is a really good way for you to see data gaps. Don't just take it at face value of the numbers. I use this as a tool to really just start the conversation. Like I said, the discussion tool of where are the data gaps? Do I feel comfortable recommending this alternative with the information that I have and the information that is out there and how the company is going to utilize it? So I would actually go in and change these process factors, because this is just a generalized if I was using it in the lab. That's how you can see it as. For what we would need to run it, but you can go back in and make these changes and the scores will change. There are buttons on the side here that you can utilize to bring more emphasis to certain endpoints. So right now they're all even for the most part, but if I was more worried about chronic human effects and acute, and that's just 4 times more, I can recalculate the weight. It will show me what the original product score of it was versus now the final score when I'm more concerned about those endpoints. Is it more hazardous in certain areas? So you can play around with that. I honestly don't use it as much. We're still figuring out when is it appropriate to utilize that, but I just like to utilize this tool as a method of comparing side by side. What are my options? What are my major hazards that I need to be concerned about? Am I tackling the hazards to which the company are like the most egregious? Like if they're starting off with a carcinogen, a mutagen, all this nasty stuff that you cannot manage and you should not have to manage, and you should be using a safer option, this at least gives you a starting point of going, okay, is this better? Is this safer? Because toxicity reduction is not a point like a to B step. It is an A to B to C to A to B, or whatever the steps. It's more complex. And I think having as much information as possible to make informed decisions is what's important here. And I hope that translates well. What's nice is you can export the category scores. So I can do that. I usually do this for companies when I'm doing a final report. I'll flip over so you can actually see how it has that information there for you. So I can put that into a report, or I can do export hazards of concern, which is nice because then it actually shows you the 8s and 10s of the major concerns, and it will show you those areas of where they fall under. So that's the main basis of P2OASys and why it kind of comes across when I say it's more of a discussion tool. When you want to make new ones, you can either do chemical or product. And that's really helpful for us to know and others to know too, because products have mixtures. And a lot of the times, depending on the company, they may actually just take the chemical and do the hazards on the SDS sheet based off that chemistry compared to just testing their product as a whole, depending on what the standards or expectations are. So we usually request even the SDS year, SDS source, CAS number for the product. And as you can see, when I click product, CAS number goes away. And it gets you into the idea of when you're looking at products to try and see what are the components in there and really deep diving into each of those. One thing that we are adding to P2OASys, we're in the process literally right now of doing updates, is we're removing the SDS format, because before we gave the option where it could be organized by section, I never used it. And neither did many others that were utilizing it. And it just makes sense to just have an enter data area. So I would suggest, if you're going to try this out beforehand, before we launch the update of this, to just utilize the P2OASys format so you become more familiarized, because that will be the main area. If you're curious of where we got our information and our scoring, it's underneath, the hazard score matrix. You can actually hit expand all, and you can see the ranges. This was agreed upon amongst I believe our science advisory board and a ton of other professionals to get their feedback on what are the ranges, what do they feel comfortable within those ranges. And it aligns, again, like I said, with the global harmonized system for that. So feel free to take a look at it. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm trying to see, also compare raw data is another thing you can do. So with the score summary, it shows you those numerical values. But if you go into compare raw data, if you hit expand all, this actually shows you what I plugged in. So that could be helpful too for printing out. One thing that we plan on adding to the update that's coming up soon is when you're hitting in the enter data, it's important to log at least what specific chemistry you're utilizing for your worst case scenario, especially with a product. And when you're assessing and putting in a numerical value, we are adding a section right here, which will be notes. So you could actually say, oh, you know, I went to this database, I don't know, for the OSHA category, and I went here and I typed in that specific chemical that's in there at this percentage. And that way, when we're having a conversation or reviewing it with other people, or I'm looking it over, Jason's looking it over because you submitted it, we know what you were considering and what you were looking at, and then we can kind of change it based off of there for our best judgment. So yeah, so that's kind of it. And that information would be public too. So if you're looking at assessment, you could actually see where we picked it, why we picked it, kind of go from there. So that is P2OASys in a nutshell, a very quick nutshell. There is a help section too, that there are tutorial videos on here on how to utilize this. And my students have found it helpful just taking two products that you want to assess side by side, get the SDS sheets as a starting point, and really just go through the tutorial videos. And once you start getting used to it, it will get easier. We also have a list of terms and definitions for you too, for anyone, if you want to recommend this to even a client for their EHS department, or anyone who wants to utilize it. This is really helpful information to define some of those things that some people, I would like to assume that they may not have that knowledge or understanding of certain areas when it comes to assessing hazard. Additional resources, you know, like I said, this is all those different resources that we use in our assessments, and then quick tips as well. So this kind of goes into, you know, when you're evaluating a product versus chemical or even a mixture, which we're hoping to have at some point, for formulators, for example, could utilize this and be able to look at different options for their formulations. What, on average, like figuring out just a general idea of what are some of the hazards of certain products that they may need to think about as they're putting them in, and not just as an individual component, but what are the implications possibly of that based on certain types of research. And, you know, this just goes into endpoints and other different information on saving, and just a review of the scores and the sliding scales I talked about. I hope I didn't go too fast, but please feel free if you have any questions or anything like that. I'd be happy to answer that on this tool.
This is Mark Stoddard again, and don't know whether you work with clients who are also subject to FDA or FAA. I know there was a bit of consternation with when I believe TSCA came up with their proposed rule, which I believe might be final now, to I believe ban TCE from vapor degreasing. But I hear a lot about, well, you know, they restrict what I can use to clean with, or the system I can employ to clean with. Does that make your job a lot harder?
Yes, and I think it's one of those things where with time and education and case studies, it's really important. I think those types of case studies, it's hearing from peer to peer, which is really important, I think, in any fields. Especially like as a scientist myself, I know I've seen case studies where you've worked with other scientists, and, you know, then coming from a standpoint of an EHS person, sometimes a scientist will be more likely to listen to another scientist, or a chemist will listen to another chemist, or a metal finisher will listen to another metal finisher, versus someone coming in to tell them things. So I always try and utilize, you know, the data testing out there showing the fact sheets that are out there, and then also case studies of other situations of success stories whenever feasible. But I understand their hardship. I understand that, especially depending on their financial situations, or even adoptions, or even misinformation that could be spread amongst vendors, or just a lack of understanding the differences between even aqueous options. It's completely different than utilizing a solvent, even how you care for it and upkeep it. And I remember at one of a cleaning conference that I went to, talking about aqueous cleaners, they were saying that some of the people utilizing it were surprised where it was getting dirtier, but it was still working. Where they would assume that maybe the solvent stays like cleaner looking because they're able to filtrate it more often, but these aqueous cleaners are meant to be able to, you know, still clean. It's just they clean differently in certain applications. So I think just trying your best to educate and to provide as many options, and seeing how flexible people are to different opportunities. It's just really hard where, you know, vapor degreasing, I get it. You either want to clean it in the vapors and it's very quick, comes out dry, you can get into those complex parts, or even immersion applications. But some of these alternatives that they have out there, I've seen scenarios where they have brand new equipment and they lost all their chemistry because some of these alternatives boil at room temperature. And it's just one engineering control goes wrong, and now they're out all that money cleaner, and they've exposed a ton of different people to those different chemistries. We also know from a long line of things that, you know, halogenated solvents are not safe, and they end up being regrettable substitutions. And I understand that a lot of them want to have less flammable options, but there will always be, I feel like there's no silver bullet right now that we've found. There's always going to be a compromise of some kind. So having those discussions of, if they're going to purchase new equipment, especially if they have, you know, an older vapor degreaser, thinking about what hazards are they willing, or can they reasonably manage while still allowing their process to work, while still protecting their workers in the environment. It's a delicate dance. I wish I could be, I know it's very vague of how I'm saying it, but it's just, it's not an easy process. It literally, I feel like we have to go try our best to collect as many success stories and find and hope that it inspires another client to be able to see that they can adopt safer options too. But working one-on-one and really kind of having these conversations about what is clean, what is clean enough, and if they have these standards that they have to meet for, you know, for different types of like FDA or for military, DoD, what are those standards and have they been updated? And maybe that's a conversation for the greater TURA community as a whole, is maybe these are areas of research of opportunity for us to be able to assist them. So definitely if you have cases where you're getting stuck, feel free to reach out. I may not be the person, but maybe we can inspire others to kind of look to see what other options are out there. I know within the green chemistry community, that's one of the things that they're always pushing is, you know, they say that some of the options out there aren't that safe. Well, that's where we need to bring in new formulations, new ideas, new equipment, and new processes. I hope that kind of.
So yeah, thank you for that response. And I know it's not as simple as replacing chemical A with chemical B, because you're usually thinking of a system and not just any one part in the system.
Exactly. Any other questions at all about the different types of tools, recommendations, or even just how you see that you could be utilizing these types of tools?
Regarding cleaning again, and I may be monopolizing your time, and I apologize for that.
No.
But do you ever find that, you know, they say a little is good, but a lot must be better. Do you find that in some cases people have encountered issues, not so much with the cleaner, but they use too much of it?
Yes, and I think that's where training comes into it, and the conversation of how much they actually need and defining cleanliness as well. I've been to companies before where it's interesting. You'll actually see one cleaning station, and then as we're talking about alternatives, I find out that they have another cleaning station that they didn't even bring up. And when you ask them why they have that, they just say, "Oh, it's always been that way," or "We just do that, but does it add to the cleanliness? Oh no, we just do it." Or even just asking that question, what is your defined clean? Like, what is clean enough? Do you have your own proprietary method of determining cleanliness? Is it, you know, just visual observation and using the expertise of these people who have refined a skill set to identify cleanliness? And that really can help with also educating them on new types of cleaners and talking to the vendors about saying, you know, finding ways to ensure that they're only using what they need, and that maybe that equipment has those types of signage and information to educate them on how to properly use these new types of equipment and chemistries.
I'm sorry. This is me, Mark, with Indiana. I find that electroplaters tend to be more the trial and error, and if it works, then why change it? So, do you ever work with electroplaters trying to clean a part, and it's maybe a cleaning bath prior to a plating bath, where they might be removing some of the substrate itself?
Yes. I think we have a recent case study too. I'll look it up for you. Do you mind if I actually take a note about this and do further research for you?
Sure, sure. I'm hoping to get back with you anyway regarding that other question involving the TCE. And actually, I sent an email while you were talking to see if I could get some more information that would help you, to help me.
Yeah, no, let's follow up and definitely have a deeper conversation about this. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of a specific example but I would like to take time to kind of reflect and like look to see what resources we have available. Because I've been in this position for close to 5 years now, but that doesn't mean that there may not be a case study that I haven't seen yet that Jason may have. Jason has a wide memory of all the different clients, and he's actually on vacation this week, but I definitely would like to sit down and talk with him, or at least, you know, we have a bigger conversation about this.
Sounds great.
Wonderful. Any other questions or?
Anyone else out there? Don't let Mark Stoddard monopolize the conversation. There's certainly other people, and I don't mean to talk and not let someone else speak up.
Fine. All right.
I do want to say, Alicia, thank you for taking time to give this presentation.
Thank you.
It was a bit interesting to start with,
Yes,
but
I apologize again about that.
no, you did very well, and I apologize for not being proactive. Probably need to have a conversation, perhaps with Nancy or Donovan, to say, okay, if we have a speaker, is there a way of putting them onto our calendar, where they get a calendar invite? There probably is a way of doing that. So, but I thank you very much. I'm grateful to Nancy for recommending you. I always hope that, you know, you mentioned the peer-to-peer. I think the benefit of being able to network on a regular basis is learning from what other people are doing. And I kind of hope that, you know, our technical meetings, where we hear from people like yourself, will maybe induce people to kind of participate, and by listening to someone speak, perhaps even discover something that they find they are doing that might be meaningful to our group. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I guess if there's nothing else, I guess we could close out. And yes, I guess I will probably be communicating with you later.
Sounds great. I look forward to it. And again, if anyone would like to reach out, feel free. I'd be more than happy to help you out with any trainings for utilizing these tools, or connect you with anyone else at TURI that may be able to help you.
Yeah, Ms. McCarthy, one final quick question. Some of us may want to link to your websites. Would that be good?
Oh, yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, do you need my website or just those websites specifically?
I managed to grab the links to all the different websites, and I've
Perfect.
included them in the minutes.
Yeah, feel free. Thank you so much.